Okay, let's get started. I have a couple announcements. Well, I have an announcement, and then I have a comment. Well, these are two comments about the exam. So you have an exam starting 30 seconds ago next Thursday. So the solutions to the problem sets. Solutions to the problem sets should be treated as required reading. I try in my solutions to not just show you the answer and how I got the answer, but to talk a little bit about why it's the answer and what it means. So I would encourage you to just add that to the stack of things that you review when you're prepping for the exam. Then this comment. Now, I have posted, and actually it's visible as of now, there's a folder on VSpace that includes a couple of past midterm 1 exams from this class. The one for last year covers exactly the same material as this year. The previous one from 2011, I think, the material's a little bit different, but a lot of overlap. And there's also the solutions. So you can go and take these exams and then look at the solutions either while you're working them or not. And this will be the extremely time-honored and well and familiar process of doing practice problems. The problem, in my view, with doing practice problems is very similar to military planning. If you go and learn the lessons of the last war, you are extremely likely to make mistakes because the next war is unlikely to be like the last war, as the French found out catastrophically in June of 1939, because they were extremely well prepared for World War I, but unfortunately found themselves fighting a very short version of World War II. So the point of all that is, I try to write my exams and my problem sets in such a way that what you're doing is you're working a problem that is similar to what you've seen, but it's not just, here's this model, now go and do some work with it. You should think of each of these problems as being, in some part, about figuring out what's the right model. There will almost always be some way in which you need to figure out what the model is. So to give a simple example that will almost certainly show up, you now know that when you're doing a model of reference dependence, part of the model, part of the utility function, is to figure out what the reference point is. Okay? And you now know that it's not always going to be obvious what the reference point should be, and I'm very definitely not always going to tell you. Okay? So figuring out the reference point, figuring out even like where the reference point might come from, is part of building the model that you then use to solve the problem. Okay? So I would encourage you to think about the problems not as, this is practice, and if I do enough of these things, I'll be prepared for what comes on the exam, but rather to think of each one of them as an opportunity to set up a model and then use it. And see if you can recognize, both in the problem set questions and in the practice problems from past exams, see if you can identify the ways in which you are actually building a model as you solve the problem. Okay? Then, what I want to add to that is that you try to spend at least as much time reviewing your notes very carefully, memorizing the models and the concepts, and really deeply understanding what goes into the models, right? Because this is not like, here's a model of a monopoly. Plug in the demand curve, plug in the marginal cost curve, crank the handle, and out comes the answer. This is not like doing Sudoku. This is not like the next level in Kitten Taxi. You actually have to think outside the box and think about how do I set this problem up right. You play Kitten Taxi too? Is that what that is? I just downloaded Kitten Taxi and it's driving me nuts. I don't recommend it. But the point is that this is not just about solving little puzzles over and over again, right? It's about figuring out how to set up a model so that you can apply it in a new situation that is similar to but not the same as what you've seen. Okay, you need to be able to generalize from abstract concepts to concrete applications, and doing practice problems over and over again is helpful, but it is not going to get you all the way. You have to spend some time really cogitating on the concepts that you've learned, and in this class, your primary resource for that is reviewing your lecture notes. Yes? If you took bad notes, you're probably going to do pretty badly on the exam. So you'll know what to do next time. Sorry, I don't mean to embarrass you. No. So work with your study group, review the webcasts, go to office hours, all of the usual things. Yeah, and next time add more mortar to the mix. Okay, that's all about that. Any other questions about the exam? Yes? As of Tuesday. I think it's set up so that everything will be available by Tuesday. I sure hope that's right. Can you send me an email, and I'll make sure that's right. I'm leaving town tomorrow to go and see my father, but I'll try very hard to respond to emails while I'm gone. Okay? Other questions about the exam? Yeah. They're up there right now. Yeah, there's 2 past exams up there with solutions in separate files. Other questions? Now, this is astonishing because I don't know if this is a cohort effect or people just intimidated by me, but nobody's asking me what's going to be on the exam. And I got to tell you, to me, that's an accomplishment. It's either an accomplishment of your upbringing or some other factor in our educational system. Thank you very much for not asking what's on the exam. I always have the same answer, which is questions. That's what's on the exam. Okay. Last lecture about reference-dependent references. We're going to do 2 things today, pretty separate, but pretty different, but not entirely unrelated. We have a final application of reference dependence, which is in labor markets, labor supply. Reference dependence has been in labor markets has been looked at a lot. So some of you may know that one of the most popular explanations for why we see unemployment during economic downturns has to do with reference-dependent preferences. I'm not going to go into that. There's all kinds of theories, reference-dependent theories, to explain why we see different kinds of wage contracts and wage offers and phenomena in markets. And here we're going to look at how reference dependence affects labor supply. And now I'm going to start talking about reference point determination, right? Because we've been sort of poking from different angles at where the heck, how would we know what your reference point is, right? If I put a mug on your desk, you're always the one to give a mug to, right? Yeah. Timothy. Yes. Okay. If I put a mug on Timothy's desk, how many seconds go by before it becomes his reference point, right? That's not in the model. We don't know. If I put a mug down on Millard's desk, how do I know whether or when it becomes part of Timothy's reference point because maybe he becomes jealous? We don't yet know. And so we're going to poke into that a little bit today. All right. First things first, labor supply. Now, this is a topic that I think. So, how many of you learned about labor supply and labor demand in your intermediate micro class? It's a mix. It's one of those topics that sometimes falls out. So, we think of the labor market in terms of buying and selling people's time, right? So, workers sell their time; they're the suppliers of labor, and firms buy them. The firms are the demand side of the market. So, here's some kind of labor supply curve, and it's the idea here is that if you increase the wage, more work will get done in the economy. More hours of labor will be supplied. Okay, for 2 different reasons. Was that a hand up? No. Okay, but I'm not calling you anyway. What are the 2 different reasons why raising the wage might result in more hours getting worked? And okay, so if you raise the wage, people will tend to work because they'll get more money from working, and so they're substituting what for what? they're substituting leisure for work when we think of work as in terms of money, right? So we're substituting leisure for money. So when the wage is really high, it's cheaper in terms of time to go out and get stuff, right? So if I want a flat screen TV and the wage is high, it only costs me maybe 2 hours worth of work versus 3 hours if the wage is lower. Fine, that's the substitution effect. And then we have the income effect, which says the richer you are, the more of both consumption and time you'll want, so you'll work less. Because hey, if I'm really rich, I don't need to work as much in order to satisfy my consumption needs. I'd rather have some free time in which to enjoy my flat screen TV. Right? Flat screen TV is only fun if it is on and you're in front of it. And even then, who knows? Which has rot your brain. But in terms of behavioral response, two things happen, right? Sometimes simultaneously, sometimes separately. I am currently waiting to hear from the Budget Committee of the Academic Senate whether or not they're going to give me a wage increase. And I have promised the Dean of the Goldman School of Public Policy, who is my employer, that if he is successful in convincing the Budget Committee to get me a wage, I will indeed work harder for him. Okay? Which means I'll put more hours into my job. I don't know if it's really true or not, but it seemed impressive at the time. It seemed like a good thing to say. Always say that. You want people's incentives to be aligned with your own utility function. So more hours work for people who are in the labor market. And the other dimension is, of course, that people who aren't working will begin to work. Yes, as the wage goes up. So we have the intensive and extensive margins. I'm going to start by talking about the intensive margin, which is the number of hours worked by people who are already in the labor market in response to wages. So this is, I don't think this is a sign, but it's on the website like everything else. This is Kammerer et al. I think that we will increasingly see Kammerer. That's Colin Kammerer. He works at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech. He just got nominated to something incredibly important, but I can't remember what. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he's done a lot of really amazing things. So we'll come across Kammerer repeatedly, and then there's a whole bunch of other people involved in it all, and I can't remember who they are right now. Okay, how long do cab drivers work on high wage versus low wage days? So you would think, well, why do we care about cab drivers? The reason is that in order to study the effect that these people wanted to investigate, they needed a very particular kind of labor market. They needed a labor market in which workers choose their own hours, right? So most cab drivers lease their cab from some company, and then for a fixed amount of money, and then they go out and they decide how long to work. Okay, they have the car for something like 12 hours, and they decide how long they want to work, and then they stop working whenever they want. They can take breaks. So they set the intensive margin of their labor supply themselves. They also needed a labor market where wages change all the time in unexpected ways. Okay, and it turns out that you can think about there's no real wage set for taxi drivers, right? The price that you earn, the amount of money you earn, is not based on your hours strictly. It's based on how far you drive, right? But it turns out that the effective hourly wage rate goes up on days when there's a high demand for taxis. Because there's a high demand for taxis, you pick up riders a lot more easily, and so you wind up getting a lot more money per hour that you drive because you don't have to sit around waiting for somebody to call you up and ask you to give them a ride. Okay? So you have a market where both the wage and the number of hours worked can change easily all the time, right? Okay? So it's a rainy day, people are less likely to take the cab. I think that's right. Is that right? If it rains, people do want to take the cab because they don't want to walk, right? So this is New York City. The alternative to taking a cab is walking, typically. So it's raining, you don't want to walk. If there's a ball game on, everyone needs a taxi. If a plane flies into your favorite tall building, all of a sudden nobody wants to do anything. Demand varies. Okay. All right, so that's that. The standard model. Now, this is crucial, and I could show you some complicated mathematical model that proves this, but I think that I can convince you of this relatively easy just with words. The standard model predicts that drivers will unambiguously work longer hours on high-wage days, okay? So if it's a really busy day, it's raining, and everyone's down on the street corner trying to hail a cab, that drivers will work longer hours, okay? And earn more money, not only because the hourly wage is higher, but because their number of hours is higher. Okay? So, and then on low-wage days, they'll go home. So I think that I can effectively convince you that is unambiguously true on a daily basis. Does anybody want to try to explain why that would have to be true for a rational person in the standard model of labor supply where you basically work to earn money in exchange for giving up leisure time? So you are saying, so demand shift is, so this is riders, and you're saying you got an outward shift in demand, upward sloping supply curve, you're going to work more. Okay? This presupposes that the supply curve is upward sloping. Okay? That's a modeling assumption, and it's in question here. It is actually the question that these guys set out to answer. So let me just, that just pushes back the question. Why would we be willing to assume in the standard model that the supply curve for labor on a daily basis is upward sloping? Why would it be the case that cab drivers would be willing to work longer on days when the effective hourly wage is higher? Yeah.
Because your labor hours are worth more to you, so you substitute a wage on leisure.
Okay, so on a high wage day, your labor hours buy you more stuff in exchange for the same number of leisure hours, or vice versa. You can get the same amount of stuff for fewer leisure hours. But the point being, substitution effect, that basically, one way of thinking of it is that the price of leisure time, right? The wage is the price of leisure time. If you want to buy an extra hour of leisure time, you have to give up an hour's worth of wage. So on high wage days, the price of leisure time goes up, so you substitute towards work time, right? That's the right way to think about it. Now, it could be that the wage goes so high that the income effect kicks in, and I say, no, now my wage has gone so high, I actually only need to work for 3 hours before I reach my optimal point. But if you're looking at daily labor supply, you don't actually have to worry about the income effect because of this following factor. When you are making your daily labor supply decisions, in the standard model, what you're doing is you're maximizing a utility function where you have a desire for consumer goods and a desire for leisure time over some long period of time, like a week, a month, or a year, right? Because your consumption decisions are at least weekly in most cases, the grocery trip, right? Or monthly, how much am I willing to pay for downloading, streaming stuff, or on a yearly basis, how big of a house or apartment do I want to live in, et cetera. And so within any given sort of period of time, week, month, year, right? You want to get your money at the least cost in time possible, right? Regardless of the income effect. You want to work when it's cheapest because that's how you're going to maximize, that's how you want a certain bundle of leisure and money, and the way you're going to get the most money at the least cost in leisure over, say, the course of a month is to work hard on high wage days because you're buying yourself leisure on cheap leisure on low wage days. Does that make sense? It's almost like on a day-to-day basis. You're just trying to maximize a profit function. So you want to work on days when money comes cheap.
So do you have also monitoring with this factor, the time factor?
Oh, yeah, so the time factor is going to be the crucial ingredient here. Now, so let's put that on hold. Yeah, the time factor, how long, like, is this daily labor supply, is it annual labor supply, et cetera. The thing is this, right, the standard model, really the big picture of the standard model, and we talked about this in a different context last time, assumes that you're maximizing your lifetime utility function, right, that you're thinking about the consequences of every single choice you make for your entire lifespan of utilities. How will this affect my happiness in retirement? How, so, and we saw investors, for example, we saw a situation in which investors seem to be doing something other than that, right, looking at sort of like today's returns as opposed to my lifetime returns. So there's going to be an element of this that's very similar to that, so that's where we're going. And you're, sorry, Daniel, that's right. And someone recently told me that there's a word for that. You call, when someone, in some other language, when someone has the same name as you, there's a specific word you call them other than the name. And I don't even remember the language. What? Maybe, something like that. Sorry, so yeah, so the thing is that, suppose that, I suppose at a certain point of extremely high, if all of a sudden without any expectation the wage rate on a particular day was $1 million an hour, then you would say, okay, I can maximize my entire annual utility function by working for 1 hour. Why would you want to do that? Because your life isn't shrunk to a day, right? I had an opportunity today to earn money real quick so that I could spend a lot of time with my family tomorrow, assuming that time with your family is a normal good and more that is better. Why would you not take tomorrow into consideration? Right? So that's going to turn out to be the key to this story in the very same way that it was the key to the story about the investors. So let me move on because I'm noticing this semester that I'm like getting way more into answering your guys' questions and discussing things with you than I have in the past. So I want to make sure I get to the end of this or you won't be able to do problem set. Okay, yeah, so effectively you're buying leisure, which is to say working less when it's cheapest, which is to say on low wage days. Okay, whoops, yeah. Okay, so here's what they did. They had data. These are called from what's called trip sheets from New York City Taxi Company. So a trip sheet is every day you're a driver, you come home and you have to log each trip that you took and how long it was and how much money you made. They compute each day's wage by dividing daily income by daily hours worked. So they don't know the actual hourly wage because there's no real such thing as hourly wage. They inferred the hourly wage or they imputed it by taking your earnings divided by the number of hours you worked. Okay. Now I don't want to dwell too much on this, but for those of you who have taken some econometrics, you may notice that there's a problem with that, right? Because if you're going to do a regression of, I'm going to regress the number of hours you worked. That's labor supply, right? I'm trying to see how your labor supply varies as a function of your wage. So I'm going to regress the hours you worked. I'm going to have a constant. That's the intercept of the supply curve, and then in my regression model, they acknowledge the coefficient type, and I'm going to multiply it by the wage, right? That's just a basic wage regression. But I'm going to measure the wage by taking your earnings and dividing them by h. Okay, so we have a very basic problem here econometrically because there's a kind of mechanical form of endogeneity here. When hours is high, when hours is high, wage is automatically low, and in particular, if there's any kind of data entry error, then if I sort of accidentally write too high of a number, this is automatically going to be too low of a number, and this thing is going to pick up an effect that's just purely based on the fact that this thing incorporates that thing mathematically. So you can't do this. It doesn't work. It's bad now. It's bad econometrics. So just as an interesting side note, what they do is instead of using each worker's implied wage, they computed the wage for all of the other drivers except that person. So I'm going to regress person I's wages on sort of like the average of everybody else's wage, all these other J's. And then what I have is right, so presumably if it's the same day and all the other drivers in the city, they're subject to roughly the same demand curve as I am, and so I can figure out sort of some proxy for what wage you were earning by looking at what they were all earning. And then you compute this thing separately for every single driver by excluding them from the data set every single time. Right? For each person, you compute the effective wage differently by removing them from the data set, computing the average of this number, and plugging it in. That's just an econometric note. I don't know. I'm just trying to throw in these little things to try to convince you that it was worth your while to take all those other classes. Okay, and then what you, whoops, we're supposed to see the results. Pay no attention to this for the moment. And then what you do is you run this regression, and you include driver fixed effects, for those of you who know what that means, to control for differences between drivers. So basically, they're saying, look, I'm going to run this regression in such a way that I'm only actually going to be looking at differences within individual drivers. Okay, so they're actually estimating not an aggregate supply curve, but the sort of average individual supply curve, which is a very different thing. And then, I'm not going to go into this, but you take the log of hours and wage so you get an actual supply elasticity instead of just the slope of the line. You'll see all that in the paper. It's an extremely well-conducted study and very famous one. And so what estimates do they get? They get elasticity of supply estimates ranging from negative 0.186 to negative 0.618. So, which says, right, these elasticities mean, for example, this one says that if the wage goes up by 1%, your supply will go down by 0.2%. Okay? So this is very bad for the standard model, right? This is very bad for the standard model. And then the lovely thing for me is that experienced drivers, however, the elasticity is for the most part positive. Okay, so I don't remember how they define experience, but it was something like 3 years or more of taxi driving experience, something like that. So we're getting this effect from sort of newbies, and they seem to be doing this thing that's in some way kind of, as you'll see, kind of similar to what traders do when they're checking their stocks. Now, questions about that? So let's see. So we want to take the next step to kind of get to where we were. Whoever I was talking to, I'm going to go up here. So without looking at the next page of your handout, given the results I just showed you, the camera at all results, what must be true about the way that inexperienced taxi drivers think about the future? Okay, this is going to be it's the time factor that's going to be crucial here. What must be true about the way they think about the future? A, they look forward to spending as much time as possible with their family. B, they anticipate opportunities to earn more per hour in the future. C, they don't take their future earning potential into account. D, they think that the daily wage will not go up.